5 years ago, I sold my Nikon D600 for a Nikon Z6, and thus my transition to mirrorless has begun. But do I regret this decision? What's up, y'all? It's Project Photography back with another video, and today I can't believe that it was 5 years ago when my transition from DSLRs over to mirrorless started. And honestly, it was not that easy of a transition. I had a ton of f-mount glass and some pieces of glass that just straight up wouldn't work on the Nikon Z mount. Like, for example, the Tamron 15-30. Even with an adapter, it would not autofocus properly. But after years of being integrated fully into the Nikon Z mount, I can give you guys my honest and truthful opinion about how that transition was like. But first, we have to talk about why I made that transition in the first place. Because as you guys know, I'm a landscape photographer, and generally speaking, we want more lightweight, more compact camera gear, because at the end of the day, you have to put all that camera gear on your back while you're hiking, traveling. And if you take up more room in your bag for camera gear, you have less room to put other stuff in there, which is why making that transition to mirrorless was absolutely crucial for me. Because when it came to weight, the D600 came in at 850 grams versus the Z6 being 667 grams. Now that might not sound like a lot, but that's a huge difference. That's like 25% off from the D600 going to the Z6. And you could absolutely feel that the D600 was bulkier, heavier. And at the same time that Nikon was coming out with these much smaller camera bodies, they were also coming out with lighter, more compact lenses to match these camera bodies. For example, the Z 14-30mm f4S was 485 grams, while the equivalent lens, the 16-35 f4, was about 680 grams. And even if you put weight aside, the compactness of the 14-30 being 85 millimeters long versus the 16-35 being 125 millimeters long, that makes a big difference when you're packing it inside of your camera bag, especially for travel. It was a big reason why I switched over to that mirrorless system. But of course, in addition to being more lightweight, more compact, we did get better technology over the SLRs. I mean, first of all, having an EVF as a landscape photographer is an absolute game changer. Being able to check focus is huge, especially because you can punch in the EVF, see what's in focus, what isn't, and adjust accordingly. Whereas if you had a D600, you don't have that ability. You would have to use a live viewfinder on the back of the screen. And there were a handful of times with the D600 where I found myself missing focus. Even if it was just by slightly, I still missed focus and made the photo overall unusable. And with the Z6 and my mirrorless system, I can't remember a time that I actually ever missed focus with these cameras. It's extremely rare. And to be fair with you, this is a big reason why having the better technology allows you to get more consistent, better images overall compared to something like the DSLRs. And speaking of LCDs, the mirrorless LCDs are far better than something like the D600 with the SLRs. Because when you think about it, right, when you have a mirrorless camera, whatever you see in the viewfinder is essentially mirrored to the LCD. So you're gonna get the same autofocus performance, you're gonna get all the same information with the viewfinder as you do with the LCD. And when it came to SLRs, the live view experience wasn't that great. It had a completely different autofocusing system, and there was a lot of features that you would only be able to use with an OVF versus the LCD. The LCDs weren't that great for photography, if we're being real. And even random miscellaneous features like having a much more minimal shutter slap on a Z6 versus a D600 was a big deal because you didn't want to incur any motion blur because of that shutter slap. I mean, when you're shooting 1 second exposures, 30-second long exposures, that shutter slap definitely came into play with DSLRs versus mirrorless cameras. The Nikon Z6 just made so much sense for me as a landscape photographer, which is why I ended up making that transition. But wait, hold up, I think there's something wrong with my camera. Okay, I think we're good now. Hopefully that fixes it. But anyways, like I was saying, there are still a few things that I do miss about SLRs over mirrorless cameras, of course. And one of those things is actually the OVF. I do enjoy using optical viewfinders. I think they're kind of fun. It gives you an accurate representation of what the lighting actually looks like in the real world. Versus when you use an EVF, you're simply looking at an image on a screen that's inside where the optical viewfinder used to be. And I'm not saying that OVFs are better than EVFs. What I'm saying is that I just love the experience of using it. As someone that grew up using DSLRs pretty much exclusively, I never used a mirrorless camera fully until I had a Z6, and so I like being able to see what my actual subject matter looked like, even if my image should have been overexposed per se in the camera. It was nice because I could still see exactly what I was shooting and not have to be like, oh, like my image is really overexposed, I can't see what I'm looking at. I can definitely see it, and that was especially nice for things like astrophotography when, to be quite fair with you, you can't really see anything in your EVF or the LCD when you're shooting astro with a mirrorless camera, but with a DSLR, you can see exactly what you would normally see. And I personally love the ergonomics of DSLRs. Like, I grew up with the D5500, that was the first camera I had back in 2016. And then I moved up to the full frame D600, and I love the bulky kind of feel of it. I just feel like it contoured really nice to my hands. I never felt like, oh, this is like a dinky little camera. And I'm not saying that mirrorless cameras are like that, but SLRs just had that extra kind of feel to them, extra kind of bulk, and I like that personally. And I personally had a lot of D series lenses, and I loved using them. I had the 35mm f2, the 60mm f2.8D, I even had the 50mm f1.8D. Like, these were all lenses that had so much unique character to them that honestly you have a hard time finding in modern lenses nowadays because they're so optically perfect. And now I'm not saying that, oh, we should go back to having less optically perfect lenses, but when you were like looking at lens reviews and watching people say, oh, like this lens is more budget versus this one, there were just much more distinct differences between the lenses, and it just gave it much more character when you found the lens that you really liked. Some lenses excelled in areas like micro contrast, some were better in sharpness, but overall, at that time, D series lenses were extremely cheap, and I actually made a video asking Nikon to come out with a D series FTZ adapter. I think that'd be really cool, because imagine if you could use like a Z6 with like the 105mm f2, like that is a legendary lens. I would love to be able to autofocus with it, but we simply can't. And these might sound like really dumb reasons to a lot of you guys, most likely, but to be honest, like these are my reasons and something that I do miss about DSLRs. But if we're asking the question of if I regret switching over, then the clear answer is an astounding no. I mean, just think about the compactness and the lightweightness by itself. That in and of itself is more than enough to make the mirrorless cameras far more worth it compared to DSLRs. And this isn't even considering the fact that lenses for mirrorless cameras are far superior to those of DSLRs. I mean, we're just getting far sharper lenses. Things like chromatic aberrations are better corrected, and we're getting better image quality overall compared to the F-mount counterparts. I mean, if you just have even used the Z-mount stuff, you know that how good these lenses are. And even some of the technological improvements like the better EVF, I mean, that's huge for checking focus and making sure that your images are tack sharp. Or when you see the live view and you get a full picture of how the exposure looks and you know what it's gonna look like when you shoot the image, I mean, that is absolutely huge. I mean, being able to see all these things allows you to have better images overall, and that's what you get with mirrorless cameras versus DSLRs. And I truly believe because I switched from DSLRs over to mirrorless cameras, I'm able to get more superior images overall. But that doesn't mean that I don't miss my DSLRs. I mean, I really do. I think about getting a DSLR like almost every single day. I miss the lenses, I miss the optical viewfinder experience, I miss the feeling and handling of some of these DSLRs, and I've even considered getting something like a D800 because I think that camera would fit more into my system as a whole because I have, you know, SD cards and CF Express cards. I feel like that camera would fit great into my camera kit. So I'm definitely not opposed to picking up a DSLR, but it would absolutely just be for fun. I mean, for professional work, mirrorless cameras are absolutely the way to go. Obviously, camera gear has come such a long way, and DSLRs, if we're being real, is a thing of the past. But it doesn't mean that we should forget where we started and where we're at now and what that journey looks like. I mean, it wasn't long ago when we were praising the Nikon Z850 for being one of the greatest and arguably the greatest DSLR ever created. And seeing cameras that have come out now like the Z6 III and the Z8, those cameras are absolutely mind-blowing. So to see how far we've come in such a short period of time is absolutely incredible, and I'm super excited to see where camera technology goes even 7-10 years from now. But just remember, At the end of the day, it's not the camera gear that makes you a great photographer, it is you that makes you a great photographer. The only thing that you can do to actually go out and take better photos is to go out and experience more of the world and capture more images. So don't stop going out and taking photos just because you got a slightly better camera. Go out and take more images. So thank you guys so much for experiencing the world with me today. And I want to hear about your story of switching over from DSLRs over to mirrorless, or if you still use DSLRs, let me know why too. I'd love to hear that down in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.